Last February, my girlfriend and her father surprised me with the fact that they were going to get very involved and take care of another one of my health issues. The health issue that they were going to concern themselves with after already concerning themselves with dental, $5,000, hernia operation, $5,000. This one was going to be to eradicate the hepatitis C virus in me. I am a victim of childhood abuse, and I suffer from PTSD, although I didn't really know that I had PTSD. I knew I had depression, but I didn't realize how significant my depression was and my PTSD was. It's actually PTSD. I researched just 2 weeks ago about PTSD, and I found out that childhood sexual abuse over a lengthy time, and mine was for 13 years, qualified me for one of the most severe cases of PTSD that they've ever encountered, or that anybody could encounter. Aside from a POW being tortured for probably about the same duration, it would be compared to that though. So throughout my life I've suffered with depression. Throughout my life, as a result of the rapes, I led a very promiscuous lifestyle, probably because I had gravitated towards drugs to anesthetize the pain of my childhood. 15 years ago, I saw my parents for the last time. I told them I never wanted to see them again because they wanted me to forgive the adopted older brother that had done it to me, a child that they had adopted 12 years into their marriage. They adopted a girl a year later, and then 7.5 years after they adopted her, I was born. So I'm their only real blood child, and I really never thought about why it took my mom 20 years to get pregnant until a year ago somebody got me thinking that maybe that's not your father. Maybe, you know, your mom couldn't get pregnant with your father, and maybe she had an affair. And it's a distinct possibility. Certainly it makes more sense that way than thinking that it took them 20 years to have a child and all they wanted was to have children. So I moved to California about 13 years ago, and I met a very, very simple, lovely, wonderful person who was just as pure as they come. She didn't have a real formidable education, but she was educated. She came from a large family, 8 kids. And you got to go back into those times. There was a lot of, you know, turmoil, Vietnam, and a lot of people dropped out of school, and a lot of people didn't go to college. And at any rate, you know, out of all the kids, I think 3 of them went to college. She was one of them. She's got a good job. She doesn't make a ton of money, but she's got a very good job, and the money that she has, it's only because she saved and lived very frugally. Her father is about as wholesome as they come. I mean, I thought of him as my father. I really did. Nobody would complain about having him as a father. And I didn't complain about having him as a father. Up until, well, at any rate, let's move on with the story. A year and a half ago, she spent $5,000 for a hernia. She had spent a couple thousand, $3,000 maybe on my teeth. And always fixing my car and always helping me out with monies. I had been going to Olive View, and Olive View had sent me to a prison to get my hernia operation, and I didn't want to do that, so she ended up putting it on American Express. And they weren't treating me for my hepatitis C, so she took it upon herself to do some researching, and she found out that there was a treatment of Sovaldi and ribavirin that was available. But if you paid cash, it would be like $200,000. If you had top-of-the-line health insurance, it would probably run you about $15,000 or $20,000. And she went ahead and bid into that. And one can only imagine why. Because she was very much in love with me. And I have to tell you, I was pretty crazy about her too. So we went to Dr. Krieger at UCLA, and he painted a picture that these were miracle drugs, that all the reports were excellent, that the success rate was in the 90s, and he said the side effects were minimal: headache, nauseousness, that's it. That was it. And we took the 2 prescriptions, and she had taken care of all the arrangements. She called all the doctors. She took me to all the appointments. She paid for everything. And almost immediately, I could tell that the drugs were very strong. But I mean, I kind of expected they would have to be. They're killing a virus. I had taken interferon 20 years before, trying to get rid of the hepatitis C virus, but it didn't work. The regimens failed, even though I took them for 9 months. And the doctor gave us a prescription, said, "I'll see you in 5 weeks." And so I went back and saw him in 5 weeks, and I told him it's a lot more difficult than he had painted it or presented it to be. And he said, "Don't worry about it, hang in there. The benefits far outweigh the side effects." And I was under the thinking that, you know what, if it wipes out the hepatitis C, it'll all be worth it. Well, about the 5th week, I knew it was going to be a rough ride, and it was getting worse a little bit, but not more than I thought I could handle. And so he said, "Come back and see me in 5 weeks." I did, and I told him it was hard, and he said, "Come back in another 5 weeks." So I did. 10 weeks into this regimen, and I knew it was going to be a rough ride, and I was telling him, "This is a lot harder than you painted a picture." And it was very difficult. I couldn't drive. It was every time I drove, I was scared I was going to kill somebody or get in a wreck, or get pulled over and arrested for driving under the influence, one of the two. The reason why I bring up PTSD and my childhood is not because I want to, but because I have to. You see, these drugs are psychotropic. They're not intended to be, but they are. They can cause major psychological disorders, and her father, with his education that he didn't have, and with her limited time that she could research, they didn't realize that these drugs create a situation for people who suffer minor depression. They can create a pretty serious problem. But for people who are like me, who suffered really badly and have major PTSD, these drugs are killers. 73 people have committed suicide on these drugs. My girlfriend didn't know it. I didn't know it. I didn't realize it until later on. About the 16th week, 4 months into it, I had quit taking them for a couple days at a time because I just couldn't take, I'd have to take a breather. So I scaled myself back on the medication. My next visit with Krieger was somewhere around the 16th week, and I went a week early to see him because I was having problems psychologically, and I didn't know what it was from. And he had retired. And I couldn't believe that he had retired without telling anybody, because there was other patients there to see him. And by this time I was crazy as a loon, and I was high anxiety. My temper was flash, and I was just out of my mind. And it was the medication. Of course, her father jumped to conclusions, and he thought I was schizophrenic, which I'm not. I'm still not. But what I was suffering from was the medication. I tried to explain that to her, but she didn't believe me. She believed her father. She thought I was as crazy as a shithouse rat. And I was, but I had, you know, there was a reason why I was. She, in fear, because one night I got in an altercation, I was yelling at her, and she told me to leave, and I did. And I barely made it home. But not before I got pulled over and handcuffed and thrown in the back of a car and all kinds of shit. And the next day after that altercation, she went to an attorney and she filed a restraining order. My medication was at her house because I was so fed up with it, I wasn't going to take the medication anymore. It was going to kill me. But you know, she had paid all this money for it, and so I wanted to take it because she did it for me. And I knew she did it for me. Nobody wanted to finish that regimen more than I did. Nobody wanted to beat the hepatitis C more than I did. Hepatitis C had already caused other complications. I've got chronic liver disease, and I've also got cirrhosis of the liver. Another thing that she didn't think that I had, but Olive View, and pulling all my medical reports, Olive View had already identified solidly that I had cirrhosis. And I kept trying to tell Sherry that I had cirrhosis before I left Miami. It was diagnosed. So I knew I had cirrhosis already before I got to California. So I figured, well, you know, 12 years later, I'm going to definitely have, you know, it's not going to get any better. Alcoholic cirrhosis gets better if you take away the alcohol. Unlike hepatitis C, you take away the hepatitis C cirrhosis keeps going, it keeps progressing. So I will eventually succumb to something that's liver failure related or kidney failure related. I've got stage 3 cirrhosis. I haven't seen my friends since my birthday, September 4th. There's been 3 birthdays that have come and gone that I would have normally would have celebrated with them. Instead, I am without a home, without a car, without someone that cared for me for 10 years. And I'm pretty bummed out about it. At Dr. Krieger's, I forced one of his associates to become my doctor. He would not rewrite the prescriptions. I took an ex parte order to get the medication back, only because I couldn't talk with my friends. I couldn't reason with them. They didn't want to hear anything about it. They just wanted to get away from me because she was convinced that I was schizophrenic. And I'm not. I wish I was, but I'm not. I applied for Social Security disability, but because I didn't have collaborating testimony from Sherry, the judge went against the vocational experts' recommendation of giving me Social Security. The judge said, well, somebody who doesn't take pain pills but has cirrhosis, she's never heard it. Well, I already knew that I had serious problems with some medications, and there were some medications I just wouldn't take unless I absolutely had to, and one of them is pain medication, because pain medications just deteriorate your liver even faster. They may give you some temporary relief, but in the long run, they're not good for you. So she used about 5 excuses why she didn't give me Social Security disability, so I have no disability. My health insurance is gone. And in my research of PTSD, I found out that 60% of all childhood sexually abused victims, 60% kill themselves, commit suicide. Of the 40% who don't, 70% of them will become homeless. And what makes up the other 30% of that 40% will either be killed while they're homeless. They will be incarcerated for doing something crazy when they're out of their mind, or they'll be shot and killed by a police officer or killed by somebody else. There's very few success stories of long-term sexually abused people. And as much as I'd like to blame it all on the doctor, I can't. I can blame some of it on my brother Scott. I can blame some of it on my naive friends. And you know, naivety is not a bad word. It doesn't mean anything awful. It just means that you're not exposed to certain information. That's all she was guilty of, not knowing. You can't be mad at somebody for not knowing. You can't be mad at somebody for fearing you either. So this is really basically a video to let her know that I forgive her for doing what she felt she had to do. I understand. I forgive her father for always pretending like he knows too much, and in this case it cost me a lot. But that's okay. I thought the relationship was perfect, but if it had been perfect, you would have hung in there with me, so it must not have been that good for you. I love you both very much, and I miss your company. The medication's still not out of my system because I still go crazy every now and again. I still have a lot of anxiety and a lot of short-temperedness, but it's dissipating. Thank God. I did not finish the regimen. Hepatitis C did come back, so it's, you know, I wish I could say that your money was well spent still, but it didn't do what we hoped that it would do. I wish now that you hadn't done that. But I am grateful that you did. I'm even more grateful for the 10 years that you gave me of your time. They were the best 10 years of my life. If there's anybody out there that's going to be taking Ptsd and ribavirin, make sure you tell your doctors if you have any depression at all, or worse. But even mild depression, you must engage a psychiatrist, and they must be readily available, closely monitoring you so that they can give you medication that will offset it. I want to apologize to both of you for scaring you. I forgive you. And I'm so sorry. I am genuinely beside myself over what's happened and how it all went down. I still think Dr. Krieger is responsible somewhat for this, not fully, but somewhat, for leading us on, but I don't have a lawsuit without your testimony, and from the sounds of it, your attorney told me you never wanted to lay eyes on me again for the things that I wrote to you. I want you to know something. I went through the restraining order that you've got, and I read them. And it's so typical for people like me that have taken ribavirin and Ptsd. 73 people committed suicide taking these drugs. Just want you to know. 1,000 or more people, and there's only been like 10,000 people that have taken this medication. Out of the 1,000 or 10,000, 1,000 people had adverse reactions so bad that they had to quit taking the medication, just like me. And there's hundreds of stories just like mine. grandmothers who never uttered a profane word in their life, cussing out their little 3-year-old grandchildren. You probably don't want to hear about this, but at least I've said it and I've attempted to get a message to you. It's the only way I know how to get a message to you, because I'm like not welcome. And I think it's pretty unfair of you to have done that. But you have your reasons and your motivations, and I'm okay with that. I hope that you find happiness. I really do. There is a side of me that's very upset with you and very angry at you, but it's not your fault. It's not my fault either. I want you to know that. I don't feel like it's my fault. I couldn't help what I was doing. So, take good care of yourself. You know me. No matter what, I'll be fine. Even homeless, I'll be fine, I guess. We'll see, because it's looks like it may happen. Looks like it may happen. I put it off for as long as I could. I'm 7 months behind in my rent. I don't have a car. That's life.